Welcome back to Beyond Global Waves.
Hmm.
You know, you know the drill, right? We take a topic that's making waves.
Yeah.
We dive a little bit deeper and see what we find.
I like it.
So today we're going to try to unpack something that's been
Okay.
kind of been on my mind a lot lately,
All right.
which is how Christianity intersects with political ideologies.
Mm.
You know, it's something we hear about constantly.
Right.
But I feel like we don't really understand where these ideas come from.
Yeah.
And how they actually relate to the gospel.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a huge point. And so many people, blend their personal politics and faith.
Yeah.
And I don't even think they realize
Right.
how these different ideologies might clash,
Yeah.
especially nationalism with the core teachings of Christianity.
And we've got two great sources here that I think are really going to help us kind of navigate this whole topic.
Oh, perfect.
The first one really dissects how some political views just don't square with the gospel.
Mm.
And then the second one looks at how technology, like European gospel radio, is being used to spread the word globally,
Interesting.
which is really getting back to the roots of Jesus's message.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, to fully unpack this,
Yeah.
we need to define kind of the key players in this ideological landscape.
Okay.
We're talking about populism, nationalism, anti-globalism, national conservatism, illiberal democracy,
Yeah.
and autocracy.
It's like all these buzzwords,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It feels like they're kind of thrown around, oversimplified almost.
Absolutely. And they're often weaponized in today's discourse.
Exactly. Can you unpack a few of those for us?
Sure. So let's start with populism.
Okay.
It often pits the people against the elite.
Okay.
And it creates this us versus them mentality.
Okay.
Nationalism takes this further
Yeah.
by prioritizing one nation's interests above all else.
Hmm.
And often that's at the expense of cooperation and global well-being.
So where does the gospel message fit in with all of this?
Right. That's where the tension lies.
Yeah.
You think about how Jesus consistently reached out to those on the margins of society.
Yeah.
He embraced tax collectors, Samaritans, and those considered unclean.
Right.
So this directly challenges the exclusionary nature of some populist and nationalist agendas.
Yeah, it seems like populism and nationalism really rely on drawing these strict boundaries.
Yeah.
And Jesus was all about breaking them down.
Exactly. And the gospel message is inherently global,
Right.
transcending national borders.
Yeah.
And you see this in the Great Commission,
Yeah.
where Jesus tells his followers to go and make disciples of all nations.
Right.
So it's inherently global.
It's like this call to global citizenship.
Precisely.
Right. That kind of goes beyond all these national identities.
Right. And it directly contradicts anti-globalism.
Right.
Which, while advocating for local communities, can often slip into a rejection of interconnectedness, which is
Right.
something that Jesus championed.
So what about national conservatism? Where does that fit into all of this?
National conservatism can be tricky.
Okay.
It emphasizes traditional values,
Right.
but sometimes it gets entangled with national identity.
Yeah.
And that potentially leads to the exclusion of those
Right.
who don't fit a very narrow definition of belonging.
Yeah.
And it's vital to differentiate between upholding traditional values
Right.
versus using them to create division or exclusion,
Yeah.
which is something that Jesus actively opposed.
That distinction is really important.
Yeah.
So then where do illiberal democracy and autocracy come into play?
Right.
These sound a little bit more intense.
They are, and they often claim a basis in Christian values
Good.
while restricting individual freedoms and concentrating power in the hands of a select few.
Right.
So it raises some serious questions
Yeah.
about how compatible those systems are with the gospel's emphasis on humility, service, and justice.
It's like they're twisting the message to fit their own agenda.
Unfortunately, that's a pattern we see throughout history. Remember, Jesus constantly challenged those in power,
Right.
particularly those who use religion to oppress others.
Yeah.
He never aligned himself with any political system.
It's so fascinating how these ideologies that seem so contemporary
Yeah.
actually echo these age-old tensions between power and faith.
Right.
And who gets to belong.
Absolutely. And I think it's a reminder
Yeah.
that we need to be discerning
Yeah.
about how we engage with these ideas
Right.
and how they relate to our understanding of the gospel.
So then how does the example of European gospel radio,
EGR.
EGR,
Yeah.
play into all this?
Right.
It seems like they're using technology to spread the word in a way that actually transcends borders.
That's exactly right.
Right.
EGR exemplifies the global spirit of the Great Commission
Yeah.
by harnessing technology to reach people across continents.
Yeah.
This approach to sharing the gospel really aligns with the message of Jesus, who didn't limit his ministry to any one location or group of people.
Right. It's like they're using the tools of the modern world to spread this ancient message of hope and faith.
Right. And in doing so, they're challenging the more insular approaches to preaching that sometimes get wrapped up in nationalist sentiments.
That contrast between global and local preaching really highlights the tension that we've been talking about.
It certainly does.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. And it begs the question. How do we balance a commitment to our local communities with a recognition of our shared humanity and the global nature of the gospel message?
That is a very complex question.
Yeah.
And I think one that we need to grapple with, both individually and collectively.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a constant tension, isn't it? Balancing that local and global perspective. And it's where organizations like EGR provide a fascinating case study. They're not just broadcasting sermons. They're building bridges across cultures. For example, they have programs that are tailored for specific regions, addressing the unique challenges and questions people face in those areas.
So it's not just this like one-size-fits-all approach to spreading the gospel.
Exactly.
They're really engaging with the nuances of different cultures and contexts.
Exactly. And that actually reminds me of a story from the early church about the Apostle Paul's missionary journeys. He traveled extensively, adapting his message to resonate with different audiences, from philosophers in Athens to common people in rural villages. He understood that the core message of the gospel remained the same. But the way it was presented needed to be sensitive to the cultural landscape.
Right. And that makes me think about how EGR uses different languages and even musical styles to reach a wider audience. It's like they're using these creative strategies to make the gospel accessible.
Yeah, it's about meeting people where they are, both literally and figuratively. And that's something I think we can all learn from. Regardless of whether we're involved in formal ministry or not. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity of every person, regardless of their background or beliefs.
That makes me wonder, how can we as individuals apply these principles of global engagement and inclusivity in our own lives, even if we're not, traveling the world or working with organizations like EGR?
That's a great question. I think it starts with cultivating a posture of curiosity and empathy. It's about being willing to listen to perspectives that are different from our own, even if they challenge our preconceived notions.
So it's not about shying away from difficult conversations.
Not at all.
Or pretending that differences don't exist.
It's about approaching those conversations with humility and a genuine desire to understand, rather than to judge or convert. Remember, Jesus often engaged in dialogue with people who disagreed with him. He wasn't afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and present a different way of seeing the world.
That reminds me of the story of Jesus talking with the Samaritan woman at the well.
Absolutely.
It was such a radical act of bridge building. At a time when Jews and Samaritans were so divided.
Yeah, he didn't shy away from her questions or her past. Instead, he offered her living water. A metaphor for the transformative power of the gospel.
Exactly. And that's the essence of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. It's not about imposing our beliefs on others. But about extending grace, compassion, and understanding. Even in the midst of disagreement.
Exactly.
That's a powerful reminder, especially in today's world, where political polarization can feel so overwhelming. It's so easy to get caught up in that us versus them mentality that we were talking about earlier. But the gospel calls us to something different.
Absolutely.
Something deeper. Something that transcends those divisions.
It calls us to be peacemakers, bridge builders, and agents of reconciliation. And that work begins in our own hearts, in our own communities, and in our willingness to engage with the world around us with love and understanding.
That's a beautiful challenge, and one that I think speaks to the core of what this Beyond Global Waves series is all about.
Absolutely.
It's about expanding our horizons, challenging our assumptions, and exploring these complex ways in which our faith intersects with the world around us.
And ultimately, it's about discovering that in a world that often feels fractured and divided, there's a deeper truth that connects us all. A truth that transcends borders, ideologies, and political divides.
Yeah.
A truth that, like, the gospel itself has the power to transform us and the world around us.
And for me, hearing about organizations like EGR, seeing how they're putting those principles into action on a global scale, that's incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even amidst all the challenges we face, there are people and organizations out there who are truly living out the gospel message of love, hope, and reconciliation.
And they're making a difference.
Yeah.
One life, one community, one broadcast at a time.
Right.
Their work is a testament to the enduring power of the gospel to break down barriers and build bridges of understanding across cultures and continents.
It's like a beacon of light shining in a sometimes dark world.
Yeah.
And it gives me hope that even though the challenges are real, so too is the power of love and grace to overcome them.
And that power is available to each of us,
Right.
not just through grand gestures or global outreach, but in the simple everyday choices we make to live out our faith with courage, compassion, and a commitment to building a better world for all.
So to wrap up this deep dive, what would you say to someone listening right now who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this?
Right.
And heavy stuff, right?
It is.
The clash of ideologies.
Yeah.
The political complexities.
Yeah.
The call to global engagement.
Right.
Where do we even begin to make sense of it all?
It is a lot to take in, you know? It's understandable to feel overwhelmed.
Right.
But I think the key is to remember we don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
We don't have to solve all the world's problems single-handedly.
So where do we even start?
Right.
Like, what are some practical steps we can take?
Well, first, I think it's important to ground ourselves in the teachings of Jesus.
Okay.
You know, spend time reading the Gospels, reflecting on his words and actions, and considering how those teachings can guide us in our daily lives.
It's about going back to the source,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Kind of rediscovering the heart of the message.
Yeah, and as we do that, we can start to examine our own beliefs and actions. You know, are we promoting division or unity?
Right, yeah.
Are we building bridges or putting up walls?
Yeah.
Are we seeking power or serving others?
Right, it's like holding up a mirror to ourselves.
Exactly.
And saying, you know, am I living out the values I claim to believe in?
Precisely. And, you know, we'll likely find areas where we fall short.
Of course.
But that's okay. Yeah. It's part of the journey.
Right.
The important thing is to be open to learning, growing.
Right.
And adjusting our course when necessary.
I love that it's not about being perfect.
Right.
But about striving to be more like Jesus in our daily lives.
And that striving can take many forms.
Yeah.
You know, it might involve volunteering in our local communities.
Okay.
Supporting organizations like EGR that are doing global outreach.
Right.
Or simply having respectful conversations with those who hold different views.
Right.
It's about putting our faith into action.
So even small acts of kindness and compassion can make a difference.
Absolutely. You know, we may never know the full impact of our choices.
Right.
But every step we take towards love and unity matters.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
It's easy to get discouraged, you know, by the state of the world.
Right.
But it sounds like you're saying that even our individual efforts can contribute to this larger movement towards healing and reconciliation.
I truly believe that.
Yeah.
You know, it's about remembering that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
Right.
Connected in ways we may not fully comprehend.
And that connection, that sense of shared humanity is really at the heart of the gospel message, isn't it?
It is. It's what transcends borders, ideologies, and political divides.
Right.
It's what gives us hope for a future where love and understanding prevail.
Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into this complex relationship between Christianity and political ideologies.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a mix of challenged, inspired, and maybe even a little bit hopeful.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's been a thought-provoking conversation, and I hope it leaves our listeners with a renewed sense of curiosity and a desire to keep exploring these issues.
Because ultimately, that's how we grow, isn't it?
Absolutely.
By keeping our minds and hearts open, asking tough questions, and striving to live out our faith in a way that honors both our local communities and our shared humanity.
Beautifully said. And remember, you don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
Start small, stay curious, and keep seeking truth.
Yeah.
The journey itself is where the real transformation happens.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Global Waves.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.